Catastrophic events are often remembered by where you were the moment they happened. Some examples. For the older generation, when Kennedy was shot, they often talk about where were you when was Kennedy shot. My generation, Challenger exploded. Where were you when? I can remember when the Challenger exploded, exactly where I was and what I was doing. I was in high school walking through the corridor, and one of my buddies came up, told me it happened, and then we ran into our classroom, and the teacher had the TV on, and we were watching the footage. Others, 9/11.
Yeah, that was my generation.
Yeah.
9/11. Yeah, can remember right where I was when that happened and who I was with and what I was doing.
Remember walking outside, and there were no planes.
No planes.
No planes in the sky. Nothing.
Yeah, grounded every single one of them.
Yeah. So, younger generation, it might be the 2008 recession. Or for most of us who are living still, the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Right?
Think of it what you may.
Yeah, think of it what you may.
It affected everyone.
It impacted the planet, kind of thing.
Sure did.
So yeah, catastrophes and how we lead through them are important, but often when we think about catastrophes, we're thinking about, oh, where was I when that happened?
Yeah. Yeah, and in the lens of leadership, I guess you could say leaders are born from catastrophes and leaders die with catastrophes. And I don't mean necessarily in the physical sense, which they do oftentimes, but I think, through catastrophes, people rise to the top, be it their character or their willingness to serve others or their willingness to go first, and make the sacrifice, if you will. But then, leaders and leadership die with catastrophes. You have a leader who was leading and then the catastrophe hit and that leader wasn't prepared, didn't know what to do. And so I think there's both leaders that are born from catastrophes or leaders that can lead through and then leaders who die because of it. Their leadership dies.
Just coming to mind, analogy that you and I maybe have heard before used in our church. If I could take an orange and I squeeze it, what comes out?
Oh, yeah.
Orange juice, right? But if I could magically take all the juice out and put ink in it and then squeeze it again, what comes out?
Yeah, ink would come out.
Ink would come out. So when catastrophe or pressure comes, the stress, what's inside is what's revealed, what's actually there.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a great word picture for what you just described.
Oh, I think so too. Yeah, Maxwell has that quote too that we often talk about, everything rises and falls on leadership, right? And so when we're talking about catastrophes, that's kind of like worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And so it makes that quote rise to my mind. Everything rises or falls like with leadership or on leadership. And if you're coming into a catastrophe unprepared, let's say, it's going to be a season of falling. And if you're coming in prepared and you have a plan of action, you have at least the emotional capacity and all of those things that we'll probably touch base on today, I think you'll be able to rise with that.
Yeah, and it ties in with that first quote you said about leaders are born or die with catastrophe.
Yeah. I mean, too, catastrophes they're opportunities, right, to learn, if nothing else. Yeah. As difficult as they may be and as tough as they may be, they're opportunities to learn and they're opportunities for growth.
They are, and how you respond to it.
Yeah,
is the question, right?
So how would you? I mean, I know we use some examples, Bill, of some major things, but what are some catastrophes that maybe aren't quite this scale, but are definitely worth mentioning? I mean, you're talking like loss of a loved one. You're trying to lead through that.
Yeah, if you have an organization that has a key leader who dies, car accident or what have you. We had that at work. We had a key leader, very well known, who passed away from cancer. We had another leader whose wife died from cancer and how that impacted him and everyone coming around and supporting him. So it may not just be a pandemic or, outbreak of war or
Challenger exploding,
hurricane or, whatever that is, or tornado. But there are other catastrophes that we need to lead through and be prepared to lead through.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a second what are the emotional phases of a catastrophe that your people will go through. And we've experienced this. We've gone through this. And I've watched other organizations go through these exact phases. Now, this isn't from us. You can Google this, emotional phases of catastrophe, and find a chart. And if I'm learned enough of my video editing, I'll add a little graphic right down here about what that looks like here and when I edit this. But first state is the pre-disaster. There's maybe a warning or a little anticipation something might happen. And then comes suddenly, impact. It happens. The catastrophe hits. And there's that emotional impact. And that's where people at first start to rise, kind of have this heroic moment. Yes, we can do this. We can come together. We can make our way through this. And after that, it's kind of a honeymoon phase if it's going on for long enough.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
All right, we're making it. We're climbing. We're doing it. We're going to get through this. And you hit the peak of that honeymoon phase. And then right after that comes disillusionment. It's like, all right, enough of this. Can we get through this?
Right.
I mean, the pandemic COVID is the perfect, analogy of that. How exhausted were you of being locked down, right? Or being stuck or closed down or shut down or can't go to work, can't do this, have to wear masks. Didn't you and the people around you go through a phase of disillusionment as a result? Whatever your opinions are on vaccine and masks and what have you, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're not going to get in there. But we're just talking about the general public response of disillusionment through that stage. And it was hitting people on both sides, no matter what your stands were. Yeah. And then after that is a slow climb out of disillusionment to reconstruction, trying to return to life. And not that life ever returned perfectly to normal. Things are still different now as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? Some things may never change.
Yeah, no, I mean, shout out to Ohio State University for providing this. Thank you to them. And but we'll show you a little graph here if we can get it on the video. But that's quite the roller coaster though when you think about it. You have this pre-disaster moment, right? And then you have the actual impact of the moment, and then you have the heroic phase, which I'm here to save the day or whatever that may look like, to the honeymoon phase,
right,
and then all the way down to disillusionment, and then eventually climbing out of disillusionment back into reconstruction. So I think the words I think are pretty good. I think that gives at least a context,
right,
and of how to look at this. And you can see this with, even with loss of loved ones. You have a pre-disaster, of maybe maybe it was sudden. You don't have much of a pre-disaster, but
the heroic moment of I'm taking care of the rest of the family, preparing for the funeral, and then once the funeral's done,
that honeymoon phase is kind of,
and that honeymoon phase of that is over, and you're just dealing with your loss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you got to reconstruct
your life without that person.
You have to
in your
move
life.
on, not move on, but move through.
Yeah.
And and pick up, from there. But so let's jump into, now that we've kind of defined catastrophe, we've kind of talked about some of the phases,
right,
and kind of went through that a little bit. Let's talk about how we actually prepare for catastrophe and how we lead through it, because that's what we're here to do. We're talking about leading through, being prepared for catastrophe and leading through catastrophe.
And it's a huge challenge. It's not an easy thing to do. It's something that, if you can plan ahead and be prepared for, it's kind of like, getting ready for a marathon. You don't just start and go out and start running your marathon. You actually have to start training.
And so the question becomes, are you ready?
Right.
And I don't think, and let's be honest, I don't think we're ever fully, it's like when somebody say, you ready to get married or you ready to have kids? Like, no one's really ever ready in that sense. No. But I think prepared is the word. So are you prepared at least, for the potential of having to lead through a catastrophic type event, whether in your own life or the lives of those you lead or globally or whatever that may look like. So, but I think that we're going to give you a few steps. Probably, 6, 8 steps. I don't know, maybe a few more, but just jot these down if you're taking notes. Make some mental notes, come back, pause, rewind if you need to do all that stuff too. But we'll try and walk through them a bit slow, but not slow enough to be boring, hopefully. So, so the first step I think would be to prepare for catastrophe. We have to be building organizational resilience, right? And resilience starts before catastrophe. So if we're able to start looking at, okay, how do I build resilience. Obviously we're talking about leading through catastrophe, so we're going to kind of go with the organization type of lingo here. So how would you build organizational resilience, Bill, if you were tasked to do that?
I think it's a matter of setting up and creating a culture of resilience in your organization, making it a corporate or organizational value that, hey, we stand strong and we continue on kind of thing. Yeah. Kind of old Churchill in World War II, keep calm and carry on kind of mentality, that we just have that as part of our culture, our DNA, and how we think and approach small challenges or large challenges. Because when catastrophe comes along, that's more than just a large challenge. That's a catastrophic challenge you need to lead through.
I think the practice would be in the small things.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like that marathon runner I mentioned earlier before. If you're out there practicing, talking about, giving consideration, reminding people, hey, this is who we are. We're people that move through this. We're resilient. We bounce back. We innovate. We move forward. Is a really great place to start. Is just creating it as part of your DNA.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of fire drills in school.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example.
Fire drill.
Yeah.
But I think so. So at least being aware of the fact that leaders, we think, should be looking at the idea of building organizational resilience. Again, practicing in those small things, making it part of our value system, part of our culture, so that we know and our team knows, hey, when we come up against a bump in the road, we are a team that moves through. We don't shy away from the challenge. We don't shy away from the mini catastrophes.
Yep.
We know that we're going to get through them. And we're going to do it together, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously when we're practicing that enough, when something of a catastrophic type of nature does, and it probably will happen again in our lifetime, unfortunately, we're going to be prepared, and we're going to be at least familiar with how we operate as an organization, regardless of surrounding circumstances.
Yeah, and just a personal example here for building organizational resilience, personal resilience. Within almost, I think it was almost a year, just a little over a year, I lost both my mom and my father-in-law. Now, my mom lived into her early 80s, 82, I think, when she finally passed away. And then shortly thereafter, I lost my father-in-law. And he lived like a month away from his 89th birthday. Great lives. And we knew there were health considerations and concerns, and the family was preparing themselves, and we were making plans and what have you to when they passed, what we need to do as a family and how we need to respond and take care of one another, right? So, and I've known, some of you may be going, father-in-law, aren't you? Isn't that a good thing? Your father-in-law, all those in-law horror stories. I didn't have those. My parents and my wife's parents would get together, go to dinner, go out to the theater, hang out.
They're like a second set of parents.
There was I've known my father-in-law since I was like 13 years old. So a long time.
Back when the dinosaurs roamed the planet.
No small thing anyway to lose those two people with a year of each other. So just a little kind of building that resilience and preparation is kind of what we're talking about here in this episode.
Yeah. I think the next thing we're going to look at is kind of goes along that similar vein of self-leadership.
Yeah.
It's hard to lead others through catastrophe if we can't lead ourselves. So obviously we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention we need to be building self-resilience first before we ask our teams to do it. Probably should have put that one first, but all that to say, we've got a couple things under this idea of self-leadership. One of them is habits versus in the moment. Explain what that means, Bill.
Yeah. I think the simplest way for me to explain this is when I was a youth pastor at church, I would teach my volunteer youth leaders and the parents of my students one simple principle: more is caught than taught, right? More is caught than taught. And that doesn't go away when we become adults, right? If we want to grow as leaders, we want to hang around people who are maybe a step above us so we can catch from them some of those skills, those mindsets, the energy, the motivation, right? More is caught and taught. Who you listen to is a preview of your future you. Right. So having those habits of resilience and being intentional of developing them, pushing through, okay, I have this weight of emotion. it's not how do I eliminate and prevent the negative emotions, so-called negative emotions, but how do I navigate and push through, right? Or I have this difficult decision to make, and I know these people are not going to be happy, but I know morally, character, best for the organization, this is the decision we need to make, and this is the direction we need
So
to go.
you're talking about really building habits as opposed to just, oh, this moment is here, what do I do with it?
Exactly. You want to build an inward. Well, let's back up. Let's talk about leadership. Leadership, and I mentioned this before, I'm going to say it multiple times. It's about strength of character. So when you're talking about these habits, are you developing habits that fosters and grows the strength of your character? Right? Are you perfect in integrity? Right? Have you you've never told a lie to get your way ever? Right? Are we doing that less and less? Are we thinking more of ourselves and what I can get out of it? Are we training ourselves to serve and build other people up, take them places where they haven't been yet before, grow them, and putting the value on them? I don't do that perfectly. I'm a pretty selfish person.
Well, we all are to it.
Right? So it's a process. It's a journey that we'll all go through, I was just reading a leadership book this week, which we'll talk about in another episode. But one chapter is all about examining your motivation. And I was really convicted. I got to say, I don't always have the perfect motivation. There's a little selfish piece of me that, I want this would look good and it'd make me look nice, and I'd come be the hero and come in and save it. And it's not about that. It's not about that. It's not about how I look. It's about how my character is growing and developing, and am I serving others to help them reach their potential?
So if I can kind of define, I think what you're really saying overall is, if I am able to checkity check myself before I wreckity wreck myself, right? And it's just something we joke around with kids, but really it's a where's my integrity? Where's my character? Have I built habits that others can catch, right? That are going to help us remain people of character and integrity, therefore being able to make rash decisions and move through catastrophe.
Yeah, as our pastor says, respond, don't react.
Respond, don't react.
Right? It's building in that resilience so you stop, pause, and make a good response, character-wise, leadership-wise, rather than just reacting out of negative emotions, bad feelings, or fear, or.
So, I mean, we could go into so many different topics, like, be a leader of patience, right?
And we will in future episodes.
Right. And all those different words we could use. But I think you get the idea of leading yourself is so important, because you're going to have to lead others through catastrophe if you're a leader.
And this leads right into our next point.
Right.
Because leadership is a team sport. Jared's an accountability partner. I've talked about this before. He has full permission to speak into my life, say, Bill, you're not towing the weight. You made a mistake this way as a leader. You need to do better. You got a bit of a character flaw here. Right. Leadership is a team sport. And this is not something that comes natural to us as leaders, because we want to be the ones out in front, setting the direction, setting the cadence, right? Carrying the heartbeat of the organization. But I got to tell you, having the support of a leader who will speak into your life, who won't give you, don't listen to your worst critics. They're going to think you're worse than you are. Don't listen to your greatest fans. They're going to think you're better than you are. Listen to someone who's going to give you honest, heartfelt advice that's going to build you up, even though it may be uncomfortable to hear at first.
Yeah, so good.
Leadership is a team sport. Within that team sport, you may have an organization of several leaders. You're partnering together. One has this skill set. One has this gift. One has that ability, right? And leaning into each other's strengths creates a more cohesive, stronger organization, but it also allows you to foster and encourage one another. Oh, yeah, I really screwed up here. I made a mistake. Well, maybe try this next time. You got this. And it's going back to things that we've said before. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake. And just because you fail doesn't mean you are a failure. That means you had a learning opportunity. The decision is, what are you going to do with it? And doing that together as a team. Right?
As opposed to solo.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So you've got build organizational and personal resilience. You've got check yourself with self-leadership, right? Because it always needs to be in there. Then you've got the idea that we're doing this together as a team. We're not going to move through catastrophes alone, which again is the whole purpose of allowing others to catch your integrity and your character and your ability to stay even keel and all of those things. More is caught rather than taught. And then that moves into utilizing others' strengths and talents and abilities. You work together.
That's right.
But then the next thing is strategy and procedure.
Right. So now you got a catastrophe to face. What now? How do you handle it? What are the roadblocks? What are the hurdles that you need to move through to get through the catastrophe? How do you need to keep the organization moving? What do you need to, well, we'll talk about this here in a second, but coming up with that strategic plan for the benefit of the organization and first and foremost, the people of your organization is absolutely key.
Yeah.
It goes against, what are your values as an organization, and are you carrying those values through the catastrophe, even though that may bring about some tough choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think the danger with catastrophes, for us as leaders is to forget who we are in that moment.
Very much.
Right. So we come across something that's going to be really tough to face, and the temptation is to react and not respond, right? But in so doing, we totally forget who we are as an organization, who we are as a person, who we are as an organization, because we've reached panic mode now. So I agree, like identifying the obstacles, make sure you know what they are now, make sure that your values and identity are so ingrained in yourself and in your leaders that it's going to be really hard to not operate your personhood on those.
Very
right?
much.
And then the idea of communication comes into play, where obviously during a catastrophe,
How do you communicate?
communication is going to be key, right? And we've talked about good leaders or communicators already, right? So again, if that's one of those things you're thinking through with your self-leadership, do I communicate, well, and all those kinds of things, and you're making that a foundation or a tool in your toolbox, I should say. Now you've got the ability to go through. You're identifying obstacles. You're making sure your values are being carried through the catastrophe, and you're operating on and through those, and then you're able to communicate effectively.
Yeah, just two thoughts. One, communication, it's the number one way in which we influence others. That's the vehicle which we do it, period. Right? That is how we influence others. That's what we do it through. That's our channel. So being able to stay on top of your communication during a catastrophe. Think of it this way, be a GPS, right? What does your GPS does? It lets you know what turns next and shows you what the turn is after that, right? Always be communicating a step ahead to your organization to maintain their expectations. And that's really a good secret of leading through catastrophe in the realm of communication, is managing expectations. What you'll see is when organizations do this poorly, frustrations rise, anxiety rise, fears rise, right? Because, what are we going to do? What's the plan? They don't seem like they know what they're doing. But if you're communicating a step ahead, it really does manage those expectations. And thought number two, going back to values and identity, this is a word picture. I hope it really settles this for you. I was on a plane a number of years ago, and I was sitting to a young student, and we're talking about, where are you from? What do you do? I'm a student. Well, what are you studying? And we talked about, well, is that what you wanted to do when you grew up? And we had that conversation, and I just kind of said, I got to thinking, and there's a thought I had in the moment, and I shared it, and I kind of held on to this ever since I said it. And I said, thinking back when I was a kid and someone asked me what I'd want to do, I was like, firefighter, jet pilot, astronaut, all those fun things that, kids want to do. And I thought, I think a better question is who do you want to be?
Exactly.
Do I want to be a person of character, of integrity, of honesty, of confidence, So when it comes to your organization and your values, it really is all about who you want to be. It is your identity. So
you're talking about, again, leading through catastrophes. You've got this idea of building resilience, both personal and organizational. You've got self and team leadership, super important. You've got, knowing the strategies and procedures. Stop and pause for a minute for just an epic reminder. Catastrophes are temporary. Right. So again, resilience, self and team leadership, strategy, procedures. Pause for a second. Okay, this is only temporary. Make sure you remind yourself and your team when necessary, hey, we're going to get through this. It's a moment in time. I know it sucks. It's difficult. It's hard, but we will get through it and we will get beyond it.
It may be a moment longer than anybody wants.
Exactly.
But it's not here to come and stay
Right.
and last forever.
And let's be honest. I mean, maybe it will take you through and you won't see the other side of it, but you will have prepared future leaders to do that.
Exactly.
So you've got, again, resilience, self and team leadership, strategy, procedures. Catastrophes are temporary, but that moves into this whole idea of, especially when you're in the midst of the catastrophe, to stop for a second and think about evaluation.
Right. You've had a strategy, you had it up, you've activated it. Now what?
Now it's time for evaluation, which we're going to use 3 words that are pretty easy: start, stop, and then continue.
Yeah.
So you start, put your procedures in place and all of that, and you say, hey, go time for the catastrophe. Take a break. Do a little evaluation.
Yep.
Continue on.
Yeah, and those 3 words carry another additional meaning too, as well, is like, what are we doing now that's working that we need to continue to do? What are we doing now that's not working that we need to stop? And then if we stop something, is there something we need to start
doing
to help carry our strategy through and
Exactly.
protect the organization?
Exactly.
So yeah, evaluation of your strategy, very, very key.
Super important.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing to think through, we talked about this idea of resilience, and we're kind of sandwiching all of the how-tos and all of that with resilience. Yeah. So we think personally to move through catastrophe as an individual and as a leader and to lead others through it, this starts and this ends with resilience.
It does.
And so again, we've come to resilience. So before I dive into it on the tail end of things, you've got build resilience, self-leadership, team leadership, strategies and procedures, reminding yourself that this is temporary, evaluation, start, stop, continue, and then back to build more resistance. Right? Resilience grows through catastrophe. Yeah. At least there's an opportunity for it to grow through catastrophe.
You think of the weightlifter, how does he get stronger? He lifts more weights. Yeah. Right. So this is the opportunity.
Resilience is the same thing.
Continue to build through resilience.
Right. Yeah. And think of encouragement too in there. I mean, part of our job as leaders to prepare for catastrophe, to be ready for it personally, to lead anybody else through it. It's going to take a lot of self-encouragement and encouragement for your team that, hey, we can do this. And, nobody wants to sit down and prepare for something crazy to happen, but we want to make sure we're going to be able to get through it as people, individuals, and as a team.
Right. And Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, had a wonderful saying. He was quoted as saying, how can you tell someone if someone needs to be encouraged?
They're breathing.
They're breathing. Right. So it's a fundamental piece of helping to carry people through building that resilience as encouragement.
And think through it too. I mean, when you're going through, and when we've seen this, for instance, when 9/11 happened, I remember where I was and being a teenager and watching this all unfold and just hearing story after story. And one of the interviews that I saw with like the firefighters and the police, and people were giving their lives and digging people out of the rubble. Oh my gosh! You had, we were right at wit's end, and then all of a sudden a truck full of volunteers came in, or we were, somebody came in and brought like bottles of water and lunches and the encouragement through those physical gifts and support is what carried the emergency services folks through that time. Yeah. So think of that way. Like you not only you're going to be serving, and one of the biggest ways you can do that is through encouragement, thanking people for their contributions. How can I give you more resources to get through this or get this done? That's what we do as leaders. We come in, we've built resilience into ourselves and into our organizational leaders, and then we encourage it in the moment, and then we continue to build it into them.
Yeah, leadership's about leading people. It really is. And it goes back to what Jared said at the beginning of the episode, is leaders are born for catastrophe. And those are all great examples of people stepping up and being wonderful leaders, serving others. Yeah.
So we got some quotes just as we kind of close out for application and encouragement. We got some quotes for you. I think we got 3 of them. Yeah. And we'll kind of close with these. And we'll close with a 4th one. How's that?
Yeah. So Churchill, about a leader who took people through a catastrophe, World War II, London being bombed, the Blitz, all of that. Talk about resilience, right? One of our favorite quotes from him in regards to this is, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah, you don't want to stay there.
You don't want to stay there. Keep going. Yeah. So, and another of his is, the farther back you can look, the farther forward you're likely to see, right? So planning from what happened before helps you, or learning from what happened before helps you to plan for what might happen ahead.
So true.
Yeah. So, and then I love this one. Our old president, Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president. Man, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing.
Right.
So,
yeah. And that's, I mean, it's silly and funny, but it's so true. Yeah. I mean, people with indecision issues and problems, like, you need to step out of leadership until you can get yourself to a place where you can make decisions. Yeah. Because sometimes the worst thing you can do is be stagnant.
Yeah, or partner with, like we said, it's a team sport, leadership. Yeah, you'll partner with a leader to help you move through.
Yeah, and then we'll close with this quote. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true.
So as you reflect and think through leading through catastrophe, again, we would encourage you. Think of and think through what it would look like to build resilience, to be able to lead yourself, to be able to remember it's a team effort, to have some strategies and procedures in place, reminding yourself that this is temporary, have the ability to evaluate, start, stop, continue, and then again, continue to build resilience in yourself and in others.
Yeah, because there's another saying that either you're in a storm of life, moving out of a storm of life, or moving back into a storm of life. So being prepared and building resilience is key. I hope you never need this episode.
Yeah, same.
But I hope you found something in there that's valuable for you.
Yeah, and if you're listening and like, why didn't they say this or that? Hey, email us. We'd love to hear if you've got some great...
Drop it in the comments on YouTube,
yeah,
please.
We're learning just as much as you are. So please communicate, throw some likes, and if you want to share and subscribe, we'll put a shameless plug in for that too.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
I'll see you.